can't breathe. I 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 can't breathe. On July 17th, 2014, these 3 words were uttered 11 times by Eric Garner, a 43-year-old black male who was tired of being harassed by the police for selling quote-unquote loosies. For those of you who may not know, loosies are single cigarettes from packs without tax stamps. Garner died that day in Staten Island, New York, after a police officer put him in a chokehold. On December 3rd, 2014, a grand jury decided not to indict Officer Pantaleo. These words resonated with me in such a manner that I entitled my speech, I Can't Breathe. Shortness of breath or difficulty breathing is one of the most common complaints for which people come to the hospital. The underlying cause may be different, but the feeling of not being able to take in enough air can be very stressful nonetheless. Have you ever tried to hold your breath even for a minute? The person that holds the world record for holding their breath the longest was able to hold their breath for 22 minutes. Okay, so let's give it a try. All right, everybody ready? All right, we're going to take in a deep breath, and I want you to hold it, okay? On my count. Deep breath, and hold it.
That's enough. Ooh.
So probably after about 25 seconds, you start to feel this little tingle in your chest. This little tingle soon turns into an intense burn, after which you gasp for air urgently. The desire in us to right the wrongs of our day and social injustices of society should be this intense. Pneumonia, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, congestive heart failure, and a blood clot in the lung are all reasons to be short of breath. The management is very different, but the symptom is the same. Having said that, we have to address injustices on a case-by-case basis. We have to dissect each case to find the true root of the problem. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Is it racial prejudice? Is it something that we as minorities can do differently? Sometimes our actions contribute to the problems we see. It reminds me of a joke I came across the other day. An old man went to the doctor complaining that his wife could barely hear. The doctor suggested a test to find out the extent of the problem. Stand far behind her and ask her a question, and then slowly move up and see how far away you are when she first responds. The old man, excited to finally be working on a solution, for his problem, runs home and sees his wife preparing supper. "Honey," the man asks, standing around 20 feet away, "what's for supper?" After receiving no response, he tried it again, 15 feet away, and again, no response. Then again, at 10 feet away, and again, no response. Finally, he was 5 feet away. "Honey, what's for supper?" She replies, "For the 4th time, it's lasagna." For those of you that didn't get that, you can get it on your way home. But all jokes aside, today we honor a man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who I believe could not breathe. The racial injustice and inequality during his time was stifling, to say the least. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the grandson of a sharecropper and the son of a Baptist minister who was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. Dr. King became a civil rights activist in 1955 as a result of an incident in Montgomery. And what was that incident? Mrs. Rosa Parks, a black seamstress, tired from working long hours on her feet, refused to give up her seat in the section of the bus reserved for whites. She was arrested and fined. King, along with other black leaders, called the black community together for support, and a successful boycott was launched. This led to the establishing of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957, with King as its first president. The organization sought an end to racial discrimination through nonviolent means. I believe Dr. King felt an intense yearning for equality and a strong desire to stop injustice as he embarked on the civil rights movement. You should get the intense feeling that you can't breathe when you see or hear about an injustice anywhere, whether it be in Surry County, New York City, or Florida. Dr. King stated, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Dr. King's feelings about peace and freedom extended beyond the boundaries of the United States. He was among the first civil rights leaders to speak out about the inhumanity of the Vietnam War and was recognized for his concern for all mankind in 1964, when at age 35, he became history's youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. King also stated, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." In 2015, we are still striving to reach this dream. Our people can't breathe. Black people can't breathe. Minorities can't breathe. And for what cause? They are burdened by the stereotypes and prejudices of our society. Our young black men especially can't catch a break. Previously, it was the color of their skin. Now it's the color of their skin and what they wear. They can't wear hoodies. They can't wear baggy pants. They can't reach into their jackets to get their ID. We should be able to walk around in a neighborhood and not be in fear that we will be killed because we quote unquote look a certain way. We see this play out in the media every day in cities across the country. Specifically, Trayvon Martin. He was a 17-year-old African-American male from Florida who was walking home wearing a hoodie through a neighborhood that had been the victim of several robberies. Martin was fatally shot by George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer who wanted to ensure that Martin would not try to steal anything from the neighborhood. Zimmerman was eventually charged and tried in Martin's death, and a jury acquitted him of second-degree murder and of manslaughter in July 2013. This sent shockwaves across the country, touching celebrities, children, politicians, and people from every walk of life. I believe if Dr. King was alive today, he would promote the importance of education, faith, family, and community to save our youth. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a church to raise the village. When we look at the civil rights movement, God was at the center, and the church served as the safe haven. This reminds me of a little boy that was lost and taken to the police station. Once he got there, the officers asked the basic questions. "What's your name?" "Johnny," he said. "What's your mommy's name?" "Mommy." "What's your daddy's name?" "Daddy." No one could get any information that would lead him back to his family. When the shift changed, another officer approached Johnny and asked, "Are there any buildings around your house that you can remember that can lead us to your house?" Johnny replied, "Yes, there is a big cross on a big building by my house. If I see the cross, I know everything is going to be okay.
Look out now.
I will be able to get home."
Yeah. Look out.
Dr. King, other civil rights leaders, and his supporters knew that with God, all things were possible.
Yeah.
They often met at churches to organize their efforts and discuss their next steps. They instilled in their children the importance of going to church and recognizing that God is the source of their strength. The combined efforts of the Black community not only began the movement, but served as a model for the youth that a collective, nonviolent approach would enable them to be the change they wanted to see. Sound role models emerged during the struggle that invigorated the youth to make a difference. Today, many of our families have strayed from the church and its teachings. Prayer was taken out of school, and the entire moral compass has been broken. To obtain Dr. King's dream, we have to get back to God. The lives and future of our children depend on it. I believe the words, "I can't breathe," were not stated, but felt in 1909 by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The NAACP was one of the earliest and most influential civil rights organizations in the United States that was formed partly in response to the continuing horrific practice of lynching and the 1908 race riot in Springfield, Illinois. Appalled at the violence that was committed against Blacks, a group of white liberals that included Mary White Ovington and Oswald Garrison Villard, both the descendants of abolitionists, William English Walling, and Dr. Henry Moskowitz, issued a call for a meeting to discuss racial justice. some 60 people, 7 of whom were African American, including W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells Barnett, and Mary Church Terrell, signed the call, which was released on the centennial of Lincoln's birth. During its early years, the NAACP focused on legal strategies designed to confront the critical civil rights issues of the day. They called for federal anti-lynching laws and coordinated a series of challenges to state-sponsored segregation in public schools, an effort that led to the landmark 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education, which declared the doctrine of separate but equal to be unconstitutional. Though other civil rights groups emerged in the 1950s and 1960s, the NAACP retained a prominent role within the movement, co-organizing the 1963 March on Washington and successfully lobbying for legislation that resulted in the 1964 Civil Rights Act and 1965 Voting Act. These acts were monumental. Voting as a right was given to all without limitations. Today, it is important to seize the opportunity and participate in every election. Just like breathing, voting should be a natural response to the need to let our voices be heard in making laws and electing representatives. We have to vote for our elected officials, not only for the president, but also for the governor, our congressmen, and our state and local officials. When Mrs. Smith called me to see if I would speak, I wondered what I would say. And I even said, Mrs. Smith, what am I going to say? She said, oh, Dana, you'll find something. What would the little black girl from Surry County say about such a man as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? I was so worried about what I was going to say, but in writing this speech, tears came to my eyes as I reflected on my life and the impact Dr. King had on it. I was overcome with a great sense of appreciation. I am Dr. King's dream realized. Because of his efforts, I was able, to attend an integrated school system that was led by an African American, Dr. Clarence Penn. Dr. Penn Dr. Penn set high expectations that inspired students to achieve and to take action. I felt empowered to accept challenges and set goals to better myself because of the example he set. Like Dr. King, I started from humble beginnings with both of my parents, William Lewis and Shirley Stansel Davis. Although my father passed when I was young, my mother instilled in me the necessity of putting God first and having sound character. My mother shared with me how active she was during the civil rights movement as well, from sit-ins as a way to protest to being jailed for standing up for what she believed. She embraced the fight for civil rights and passed this valuable heritage on to me to be vocal and speak up for what's right. When I was at Eastern Virginia Medical School, I remember being one of 10 black students in a class of 105. That was the most African Americans that had ever been accepted in one Doctor of Medicine degree program in the history of the school. 10 out of a class of 105. During the registration period, sorry. During the registration period, we had to obtain identification badges and decals for our vehicles. And a group of us were walking across the parking lot together, and one of the black parking attendants, who was probably in his mid to late 60s, said, grinning from ear to ear, "I see the face of EMS changing." Excuse me. And at that time, we didn't understand the true meaning understand the true meaning of that comment, or even what the impact it had on this gentleman. But as I have gotten older, I understand. I understand. It was the epitome of Dr. King's dream. People of color penetrating a previously all-white institution without having to protest, without having to be in prison. Without having to be hosed in the streets, or without having dogs snipping at your ankles. We didn't have to do that because there were others that did that before us. There were others that endured so that we could benefit. In 2002, there was a hot topic on Capitol Hill where there was legislation that would threaten to decrease the enrollment of minorities into medical schools across the country. We found out about a march in D.C. that was being hosted by the Student National Medical Association, and at the last minute decided to leave our 8 a.m. medical school class and drive to D.C. to stand with other minorities. I remember calling my mom to tell her we were going to D.C. and why. Even though we were already in medical school, it was not about us. It was about those that were coming behind us. Those minorities that needed the same opportunity that we had been afforded. We did not want to lose the momentum of this thing of which we were a part. The Surry County public school system and the Surry County community poured into me a similar sense of pride. Not the pride of being more than others, but pride that I matter. The educational foundation I received in Surry has done me well, both inside and outside the classroom. Not only did Surry County Public Schools produce lawyers and doctors, but excellent educators, nurses, accountants, machinists, engineers, and a wealth of other occupations that help establish a legacy of greatness for our county. To those of you here today that are products of such a great school system, I say our work is not done. In closing, when you see disturbing stories about people's civil rights being challenged, don't get mad and call your best friend to talk about it. Remember, take a deep breath, hold it for 30 seconds, and spring into action. Thank you.